Welcome to the Midnight Chronicler. Before we begin our journey tonight, I invite you to subscribe, if you haven't already. Each evening, I bring you a new story from history, a place to rest your mind as you drift towards sleep. And please, share your thoughts in the comments. If you could witness any historical ritual from the past, which would you choose? Tonight, we travel north, to the fjords of 9th century Scandinavia, to a world where death was not an ending, but a journey, where the living honored the dead with fire and ceremony, with ships and silver, with songs that echoed across cold waters. You are not a warrior, you are not a chieftain. You are Bjorn, a 30-year-old craftsman, and your father has just died. For the next 2 hours, you will walk beside him on his final journey. You will prepare his body with your own hands. You will choose the treasures that will accompany him to the afterlife. You will stand on the shore as flames consume the ship that carries him beyond this world. This is not legend. This is not myth. This is what the Norse people actually did, how they honored the dead, how they understood the boundary between life and death, how they said goodbye. Close your eyes. The northern wind is cold tonight. Let us begin. Your father died at dawn. You were holding his hand when his breath stopped, when his chest ceased its rising and falling, when the warmth began to leave his fingers. He was 62 years old. For a Viking, this was a long life. A good life. But now comes the work of the living. The sacred work. The work that will determine where your father's soul travels, how he will be remembered, whether he will find honor in the world beyond this one. To understand what you must do, you must first understand what the Norse people believed about death. And those beliefs were not simple. They were not singular. They were as complex and layered as the world itself. The Norse did not believe in one afterlife. They believed in many, and where a person went after death depended on how they lived, how they died, and how their family honored them. The most famous destination was Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain, Odin's great mead hall in Asgard, where the bravest warriors feasted and fought, preparing for Ragnarok, the end of all things. To reach Valhalla, a warrior had to die in battle, weapon in hand. The Valkyries, Odin's choosers of the slain, would descend to the battlefield and select half of those who fell. These chosen warriors would ride with the Valkyries back to Asgard, to eternal glory. But Valhalla was not the only hall of honor. The goddess Freya presided over Folkvanga, her own realm, where she received the other half of those who died in battle. The sources are unclear about exactly how the division was made. Some scholars believe Freya had first choice, taking the warriors she preferred before Odin claimed his share. Others believe the selection was based on different criteria, perhaps loyalty, perhaps lineage, perhaps something unknowable to mortal minds. What is clear is this: dying in battle was the surest path to honor. But most people did not die in battle. Most people died in their beds, of illness, or age, or accident. And for them, the afterlife was different. Your father was a craftsman. A skilled woodcarver who made everything from ship prows to house posts, from tools to toys. He died peacefully, in his sleep, after a fever that lasted 3 days. He did not die with a weapon in his hand. He will not go to Valhalla. He will not ride with the Valkyries. Instead, his soul will travel to hell. The name sounds dark to modern ears, influenced by Christian notions of hell as a place of punishment and torment. But the Norse hell was not like that. It was simply the realm of the dead, a cold, misty place beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree. The goddess Hel, daughter of Loki, ruled there. She was described as half alive and half dead, her body divided down the middle, one side beautiful, the other corpse-like. Hell was not a place of torture. It was a place of continuation. The dead continued in a shadowy existence, neither suffering nor celebrating, simply being. It was described as cold and dark, yes, but not actively cruel. The dead dwelt in Hell's halls, and there they remained. But reaching Hell was not automatic. The soul had to make a journey. And that journey was treacherous. First, the soul had to cross a bridge called Galabru, which spanned the river Gjol. This bridge was guarded by a maiden named Moga, who asked each soul their name and lineage. The bridge itself was said to be thatched with glittering gold, though no living person had seen it. After crossing the bridge, the soul continued north and downward, through increasingly dark and cold regions, until finally reaching the gates of Hell. These gates were called Hellgrind, and they were guarded by the monstrous hound Garma, who would one day break free at Ragnarök and fight the god Tyr. The journey could take 9 days and 9 nights. During this time, the soul was vulnerable. It needed provisions. It needed protection. It needed the proper tools to navigate the treacherous path. This is why the grave goods mattered. This is why you must choose carefully what to place with your father's body. He will need these things on his journey. He will need food and drink for 9 days. He will need warm clothing against the cold. He will need a knife to defend himself. Perhaps a torch to light the way. But the grave goods served another purpose, too. They showed the world, both the living and the dead, who your father was. What he valued. What his family thought of him. How much honor he deserved. A poor burial suggested a person of little worth. A rich burial suggested someone of status and respect. The burial was a final statement about a life lived. And you wanted that statement to be worthy of your father. The Norse also believed that the dead could affect the living. A person who died angry or dishonored might become a Draugr, a restless undead being who haunted their burial mound or the places they had known in life. Draugr were dangerous. They were strong, they could change their size, they could drive people mad. The sagas are full of stories about Draugr terrorizing villages until a hero came to destroy them. To prevent your father from becoming Draugr, you had to honor him properly. You had to ensure he was content with his burial. You had to give him no reason to return and trouble the living. There was also the matter of the family's reputation. How you buried your dead reflected on your entire lineage. A shameful burial brought shame to all. A magnificent burial brought glory. People would remember how Bjorn's father was laid to rest. They would speak of it for years, perhaps for generations. And so you face this night with both love and duty. Love for the man who taught you to carve wood, who told you stories by the fire, who laughed at your jokes and scolded your mistakes. Duty to your family, to your community, to the old ways that stretched back beyond memory. You stand in the doorway of the house where your father died. The sun is low on the horizon. In the far north, summer means the sun barely sets at all, just touches the edge of the world before rising again. But it is not summer now. It is autumn. The days are shortening. The nights are growing cold. Soon, winter will come and the sea will freeze and nothing will move until spring. You must complete the funeral rites before winter arrives. Before the ground becomes too hard to dig. Before the sea becomes impassable. Your father must be honored properly, and it must be done soon. Behind you, in the house, your father's body lies on his bed. Your mother sits beside him, silent. She has not spoken since he died. She simply sits, one hand resting on his chest, feeling the stillness there. Your sister is preparing food for the funeral feast. Your brother has gone to spread word to the neighboring farms. By tomorrow, dozens of people will arrive to witness the ritual, to pay their respects, to help with the work that must be done. But tonight, this first night, it is just your family. Just the ones who knew him best. Just the ones who must wash his body and dress him and begin the preparations. You take a breath. The air smells of salt and pine. Somewhere in the distance, a raven calls. Ravens are Odin's birds. Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, who fly across the world each day and return to whisper news in the All-Father's ears. The presence of a raven at a death was considered significant. Perhaps Odin was watching. Perhaps he would remember your father, even though he had not died in battle. You turn and walk back into the house. There is work to do. The interior is dim. The central hearth fire has burned low. The smoke drifts up toward the hole in the roof, where a small circle of darkening sky is visible. The walls are lined with carved posts, some of your father's work, animals and interlacing patterns. Dragons and trees. The old symbols. Your mother looks up as you enter. Her eyes are red, but she has no tears left. She has been crying since dawn. Now she is empty. Now she is ready to work. We should begin, she says quietly. You nod. Together, you approach your father's body. He looks smaller than he did in life. Death does that. It diminishes. The spirit that animated him, that made him laugh and argue and create, is gone. What remains is just flesh and bone. A shell. But it is a shell that must be treated with utmost care and respect. Your mother begins to undress him. This is her right, and her duty. She removes the tunic he died in, the trousers, the woolen socks. She folds each item carefully and sets them aside. These clothes will not go with him to the grave. They belong to the world of the living now. Perhaps they will be burned. Perhaps given away. That decision will come later. His body is pale. The blood has settled to his back and legs, leaving dark purple marks. His mouth is slightly open. His eyes are closed. Your mother had closed them shortly after he died, placing coins over the lids to keep them shut. The coins are still there, small silver pieces that catch the firelight. Bring water, your mother says. And cloth. You fetch a wooden bucket from the corner. It is filled with water from the stream, cold and clean. You also bring several strips of linen cloth, woven by your sister over the long winter nights. Your mother dips a cloth in the water and begins to wash your father's face. She is gentle, methodical. She washes away the sweat of his final fever. She cleans his beard, which has grown wild in his last days of illness. She washes his hands, which are calloused from decades of work, scarred from countless small cuts and burns. This washing is ritual. It is practical, yes, cleaning the body before burial, but it is also symbolic. It purifies. It prepares. It marks the transition from the realm of the living to the realm of the dead. You help. You wash his arms, his chest, his legs. The water in the bucket turns gray. You empty it outside and refill it. You wash again. You want him to be clean. You want him to arrive in hell looking like a man of dignity, a man who was loved and cared for. When the washing is complete, your mother produces a comb made of antler. She combs your father's hair, which is long and gray, tangled from his days of fever. She works patiently, untangling each knot, smoothing each strand. Then she combs his beard, shaping it the way he used to shape it himself, divided into two braids that hang down his chest. He always took pride in his appearance, she murmurs. Even when he was old. Even when his hands shook and it took him an hour to braid his beard. He said a man should look like a man. You smile slightly, remembering. Your father was vain, in his way. Not excessively, but he cared about how he presented himself. He believed appearance mattered. It was a form of respect, respect for oneself and for others. Next comes the clothing. Your mother has prepared special garments for this purpose. A fine tunic made of dark blue wool. Trousers of the same material. A leather belt with a bronze buckle shaped like a serpent. Woolen socks, newly made. And a cloak, heavy wool lined with fur, fastened with a silver brooch. Dressing a dead body is difficult. The muscles are stiff. The limbs don't bend easily. But your mother works with practiced hands. She has done this before. Everyone in the Norse world has done this before. Death is common. Childbirth, disease, accident, violence. People die young and often. and those who survive must know how to honor them properly. Together, you maneuver your father's arms into the tunic. You pull the trousers up over his stiff legs. You fasten the belt around his waist. You slide the socks onto his feet and tie the cloak around his shoulders. When you are finished, he looks like himself again. Or rather, he looks like the version of himself he would have wanted to present to the gods. Dignified. Well-dressed. A man of some means, some skill, some honor. Your mother steps back and examines the work. She adjusts the brooch slightly, centering it. She smooths a wrinkle in the cloak. Then she nods. He looks well, she says. He does, you agree. Tomorrow, we will place him in the ship, she continues. We will bring his tools, his possessions. We will feast in his honor. And then we will send him on his way. You nod. The ship. Yes. That is the next step. The most important step. Your father will be buried in a ship. Not a full-sized warship, your family cannot afford that, but a small boat, big enough to hold his body and his grave goods. The ship will carry him symbolically across the waters that separate the living world from the world of the dead. It will be both his vessel and his tomb. Ship burials were reserved for people of status. Not everyone received such honor. The poor were buried simply, perhaps just wrapped in cloth and placed in the ground. But your father was respected. He was skilled, and your family has saved for years to give him a proper send-off. The ship is waiting at the shore, pulled up onto the beach. Tomorrow, you will fill it with everything your father needs for his journey and his afterlife. You will make it a dwelling worthy of him. But tonight, you sit with him. You keep vigil. It is traditional for the family to stay awake through the first night, to guard the body and speak to the dead one's spirit, telling it what will happen, assuring it that all will be done properly. Your mother sits on one side of the bed. You sit on the other. Your sister joins you after she finishes preparing tomorrow's food. The three of you sit in the dimness, listening to the fire crackle, listening to the wind outside. Tell him, your mother says to you. Tell him what we are going to do. It feels strange to speak to a corpse. But you do it. The Norse believed the spirit lingered near the body for a time before beginning its journey. It could hear. It could understand. It needed to know what was happening. Father, you begin, your voice quiet. Tomorrow, we will carry you to the shore. We will place you in the boat we have prepared. We will surround you with everything you need. Your tools, your cloak, food and drink, silver and bronze, your favorite cup, the knife you made yourself. Everything. You pause. Your throat is tight. We will feast in your honor. Everyone will come. Thorgrim, Astrid, Eric the Tall, all of them. They will drink to your memory. They will tell stories about you. They will remember the time you carved that dragon prow for Jarl Sigurd's ship, and he said it was the finest he had ever seen. They will remember your laugh, your skill, your kindness. Your sister speaks now, and I will sing for you, Father. The death song, the way you taught me. I will sing you across the water. Your mother says nothing. She simply holds your father's hand. But her presence is enough. Her silence speaks louder than words. The night passes slowly. The fire burns lower. The shadows deepen. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the door, whistling through cracks in the walls. It sounds almost like voices. Almost like singing. The Norse believed that on nights like this, the boundary between worlds grew thin. The dead could hear the living. The living could sometimes hear the dead. If you listened carefully, you might hear your ancestors calling from their burial mounds, or the warriors feasting in Valhalla, or the quiet whispers of those dwelling in hell. You listen, but you hear only wind. Still, you feel something. A presence. Not frightening. Just there. Perhaps it is your father's spirit, lingering, listening, understanding. Perhaps it is your imagination. It doesn't matter. You speak to him as though he is listening, because whether or not his spirit is truly present, speaking helps you. It helps you process what is happening. It helps you say goodbye. I will honor you, Father, you whisper. I will make you proud. I will tell my children about you. Your name will not be forgotten. And that, in the end, is what matters most in Norse culture. Not wealth. Not even glory in battle. But memory. Being remembered. Having your name spoken by future generations. That was true immortality. The dead lived on in the memories of the living. And so the living had a sacred duty to remember. To tell the stories. To speak the names. To honor the past. As dawn approaches, the sky begins to lighten. The vigil is nearly over. Soon, people will start arriving. Soon, the work will intensify. But for now, in these last quiet moments, it is just your family and your father's body and the dying firelight. Your mother stands. She stretches, her joints cracking. She is not young anymore. This has been hard on her. Losing her husband. Preparing his body. Facing the future alone. But she is strong. She will endure. The Norse women always did. Get some rest, she tells you and your sister. You will need your strength for what comes next. You nod. You rise. You take one last look at your father, lying peacefully in his funeral clothes. Tomorrow, you will carry him to the ship. You will fill that ship with his life. And then you will send him on his final journey. But tonight, you have kept vigil. You have honored him with your presence. You have spoken to his spirit. And that is enough. For now. You wake to voices outside. The sun is fully risen now, though it is weak and pale through the grey clouds. Autumn in Scandinavia is a season of fading light, of long shadows, of the world slowly dying before winter's arrival. You sit up on your sleeping bench. Your sister is already awake, tending the fire, heating water for porridge. Your mother is outside, greeting the first arrivals. You dress quickly, wool trousers, a linen shirt, a leather vest, your good cloak. Today is important. Today, you will show your community how much your father meant to you. When you step outside, you see that a dozen people have already gathered. More are walking up the path from the neighboring farms. They carry bundles, food for the feast, gifts for the dead, offerings of respect. Thorgrim the Elder approaches you. He is your father's oldest friend, a weathered man with a scarred face and missing fingers, marks of a life spent at sea and in battle. He fought in raids when he was young. Now he is old and his raiding days are done, but his reputation remains. Bjorn, he says, gripping your forearm in the warrior's greeting. Your father was a good man. A skilled man. I will miss him. Thank you, Thorgrim, you reply. I have brought silver, Thorgrim continues, producing a small pouch from his belt. It is not much, but I want it to go with him. He carved a crib for my daughter 40 years ago. Beautiful work. I never forgot it. You accept the pouch. Inside are several small silver coins, hacksilver cut from larger pieces. This is how the Norse often measured wealth, not in intact coins but in weight of precious metal. The silver will go into your father's grave. It will show the gods and the dead that he was valued, that people thought him worth honoring with treasure. Others come forward with their own gifts. Astrid, a widow from the next farm, brings a finely woven blanket. For warmth on his journey, she explains. Eric the Tall brings a bottle of mead, sealed with wax. So he can drink in the afterlife, he says. By mid-morning, 24 people have arrived. Your brother has returned from his rounds, having spread the word to every household within a day's walk. Some people have come from even farther, traveling through the night to be here. Your father was well liked. Well respected. His funeral will be well attended. Now comes the work of preparing the ship. The vessel waits at the shore, a small carvey, perhaps 20 feet long. It is old, no longer seaworthy, which is why your family could afford to purchase it for this purpose. The hull is sound enough, but the planks are warped in places, and the sail has long since rotted away. It doesn't matter. This ship will never sail again in the mortal world. It sails now in the realm of symbol and spirit. A group of men helps you drag the ship farther up the beach, to a spot where the ground is softer, easier to dig. The plan is to partially bury the ship, creating a mound over it. This way, your father will rest both in a ship and in the earth, both sailing and settled, both journeying and home. While some men begin digging the trench where the ship will sit, you and your closest family members begin to prepare the interior. First, you line the bottom with furs and blankets. The journey to hell is cold, and your father will need warmth. You layer sheepskins and bearskins, creating a soft bed. On top of this, you place several woven blankets, including the one Astrid brought. Next, you start arranging the grave goods. This is where the real work begins. Every item must be chosen carefully. Every item tells a story. You start with your father's tools. He was a woodcarver, so his tools were precious to him. You bring his favorite knife, its handle worn smooth from decades of use. You bring his chisels, a full set, each one sharp and well maintained. You bring his axe, which he used not for fighting but for shaping wood. You bring the whetstone he used to sharpen these tools, worn down to half its original size. These tools go near his right hand, arranged carefully, ready for use. In the afterlife, your father will still be a craftsman. He will still create. These tools will serve him there as they served him here. Next, you bring items of personal significance. His favorite cup, made of carved wood, decorated with interlacing patterns. His comb, the one he used every morning to tame his beard. His belt buckle, bronze shaped like a serpent swallowing its own tail, the symbol of eternity, of cycles, of endings that are also beginnings. You bring clothing beyond what he already wears. Extra trousers, another cloak, woolen mittens, leather shoes. The afterlife is cold, and he will need many layers. You bring food. Not fresh food, which would rot, but preserved food. Dried fish, smoked meat, hard cheese wrapped in cloth, oat cakes, a sealed jar of honey, another of butter. These provisions will sustain him on his 9-day journey to hell. Even the dead need to eat. You bring drink. The bottle of mead from Eric. A wooden flask filled with beer. Another flask filled with fresh water from the stream. Your father enjoyed his drink in life. He will enjoy it in death. Now comes the wealth. The silver coins from Thorgrim and others. A bronze armband that was your father's, given to him by his own father. A small gold ring, simple but valuable. These items demonstrate that your father was a man of means, a man who had earned respect and prosperity. You also include items of iron. Iron was precious in the Viking Age, more precious than gold in some ways because it was useful. You place an iron knife in the ship, and an iron fire striker, and several iron nails. If your father needs to build or repair anything in the afterlife, he will have the materials. Your mother brings personal items. A lock of her hair, bound with thread, to show that part of her goes with him. A small wooden figure your father carved years ago, a horse, simple but beautiful. She places it near his left hand. He made this when we were first married, she says quietly. I kept it all these years. Now it goes with him. Your sister brings something too, a small lyre, a stringed instrument. Your father never played it, but he appreciated music. He would sit for hours listening to the skalds sing their poems and songs. The lyre will ensure he has music in the afterlife. You bring one final item, a small wooden boat you carved yourself, modeled after the ship he now lies in. It is crude compared to your father's work, but you made it with care. It is your gift to him. A son's tribute to a father. You place it at his feet. By now, the ship is crowded with objects. The interior is a treasure trove, a museum of a life lived. Anyone looking at this burial will understand immediately who your father was: craftsman, family man, respected member of the community, a person who valued skill, beauty, and connection. But you are not done yet. The Norse sometimes included animals in their burials, particularly for wealthy or important people. Horses, dogs, even cattle might be sacrificed and buried with the dead to serve them in the afterlife. Your family cannot afford a horse, but you have a dog. An old hunting hound who has been part of the family for years. The dog is nearly blind now, its muzzle gray, its movements slow. It has lived a good life, but that life is ending. The decision to include the dog in the burial is difficult. You love this dog, but you also know that your father loved it more. The dog slept at the foot of his bed every night. It followed him to his workshop every day. They were companions. It seems wrong to separate them now. Your mother makes the decision. The dog should go with him, she says firmly. They should not be parted. You nod, though your heart is heavy. One of the men, experienced in such matters, takes the dog aside. He speaks to it gently, strokes its head, then ends its life quickly with a single knife thrust. The dog does not suffer. It barely has time to understand what is happening before it is over. You carry the dog's body to the ship and place it at your father's feet, curled as though sleeping. In the afterlife, your father will have his faithful companion once more. They will walk together through the cold lands of hell, just as they walked together through the fields and forests of Midgard. The ship is ready. The grave goods are arranged. Your father lies in state, surrounded by everything he needs for his journey and his eternity. Now comes the moment you have been dreading. You must carry your father from the house to the ship. 6 men are chosen for this honor: yourself, your brother, Thorgrim, and 3 other close friends of your father. You lift him carefully, supporting his head, his back, his legs. His body is stiff with rigor mortis, which makes the task easier in some ways, harder in others. He is rigid, unyielding, a weight that must be carried with care. The path from the house to the shore is not long, but every step feels significant. People line the route, watching in silence. This is the procession of the dead. The final walk. The last time your father will travel this path. Your mother walks behind you, her hand on your shoulder. Your sister walks beside her, singing quietly. The death song. A melody without words, just a haunting vocalization that rises and falls like waves. Other women join in, harmonizing. The sound is beautiful and terrible. It echoes across the landscape, carrying your father's spirit toward the ship, toward the sea, toward the unknown. When you reach the shore, you carefully lower your father into the ship. You position him just right, his head toward the prow, his feet toward the stern, as though he is the captain of this vessel, steering it toward his destination. You step back. The ship is complete. Your father is ready. But the ritual is not over. Not yet. Now comes the feast. Tables have been set up near the shore, long wooden planks resting on trestles. The women have been working all morning, preparing food for the dozens of people in attendance. There is roasted pork, fresh caught fish, bread baked in outdoor ovens, boiled vegetables, wheels of cheese. There are barrels of beer and bottles of mead. This is not a somber meal. The Norse funeral feast is a celebration of life, of memory, of community. You sit at the head of the table, as is your right as the eldest son. Your mother sits beside you. The guests fill in around you, talking in low voices, sharing memories of your father. Thorgrim stands and raises his cup. A toast, he announces. To my friend. To the best woodcarver I ever knew. To a man who understood that skill is a form of honor. May he find peace in hell. May his name be remembered. Scowl. Everyone shouts, raising their cups. You drink. The mead is sweet and strong, burning as it goes down. Others stand and offer their own toasts. Stories are told. Laughter rises. Someone remembers the time your father accidentally carved a dragon that looked more like a chicken, and how he laughed harder than anyone when he realized his mistake. Someone else remembers how he helped rebuild a neighbor's house after a fire, working for days without asking for payment. The feast continues for hours. The sun moves across the sky. More beer is poured. More stories are told. This is how the Norse honored the dead, not with silence and tears, but with joy and remembrance. Death was not the opposite of life. It was part of life. And so it should be celebrated. As the afternoon wears on, the tone shifts. The laughter fades. The stories grow quieter. People begin to glance toward the ship, toward the body lying there, toward the inevitable next step. It is time. You stand. Everyone falls silent. Thank you, you say, your voice carrying across the gathering. Thank you for coming. Thank you for honoring my father. He would have been proud to see so many people here. He would have been proud to know he was loved. You pause, gathering yourself. Now we will send him on his way. As is our custom. As is right. The men who helped dig the trench now help lower the ship into it. It settles into the earth with a soft thud. The vessel is positioned perfectly, aligned with the shore, pointing toward the water, toward the horizon, toward the unknown. Now comes the covering. Earth is shoveled over the ship, slowly at first, then faster. The prow disappears. The stern. The sides. Within an hour, the ship is completely buried, visible only as a long mound of freshly turned soil. Stones are placed on top of the mound, large stones, carried from the surrounding hills. These stones serve both practical and symbolic purposes. They weigh down the earth, preventing it from washing away in storms. They also mark the grave, making it clear that this is a burial site, a sacred place, a location to be respected. Some graves are marked with standing stones, carved with runes telling the name of the dead and their deeds. Your family cannot afford such a stone, but perhaps someday, when you have saved enough, you will commission one. For now, the mound itself is marker enough. As the final stones are placed, your sister sings again. The death song. But this time, it is different. This time, it is not mournful. It is powerful. It is a sending off. A blessing. A farewell. The sun is setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and purple. The wind has picked up, carrying the smell of salt and seaweed and earth. Your mother steps forward. She kneels at the edge of the mound and places her hand on the fresh soil. Go well, my love, she whispers. Go well. You kneel beside her. You place your hand on the mound too. Go well, father, you echo. Go well. One by one, others come forward. They touch the mound. They speak their farewells. They leave small offerings, flowers, coins, bread, pressing them into the soil. This is the final act. The final goodbye. Your father's spirit is released now. It begins its journey, 9 days and 9 nights to hell. Through cold and darkness. But he is not alone. He has his tools, his wealth, his dog, his provisions. He has the love of his family carried with him in memory and song. He has been honored properly. He will arrive in the afterlife as a man of worth. And here, in the world of the living, he will be remembered. His name will be spoken. His deeds will be told. His work, the carvings and tools and beauty he created, will remain. His children will have children, and they will speak of him. His grandson will grow up hearing stories about the grandfather he never met, the craftsman who could coax dragons from wood. This is the Norse understanding of death. Not an ending, but a transformation. The body returns to the earth. The spirit travels to another realm. And the memory, the name, the story, these live on forever in the hearts and words of the living. As the last of the guests depart, as the sky darkens fully into night, you remain at the mound. Just for a moment longer. Just to sit in the quiet. Just to feel the presence of your father, fading now, moving away, beginning his journey. The wind whispers through the grass. The sea murmurs against the shore. A raven calls in the distance. And you know, somehow, that he is not truly gone. He is here, in this mound. He is there, on the road to hell. He is everywhere his memory reaches. He is in your hands when you carve wood. He is in your voice when you tell his stories. He is in the world, woven into it, part of it, eternal. You stand. You turn toward home. You walk away from the mound, but not from your father. He goes with you. He always will. The ship burial is the most elaborate and expensive form of Norse funeral rite. Not everyone received such honor. Most people were buried simply, wrapped in cloth or laid in wooden coffins, placed in the ground with minimal grave goods. But for those of status, for those who had wealth or reputation or family willing to spend, the ship burial was the ultimate send-off. To understand why ships were so important, you must first understand what ships meant to the Norse people. Ships were not merely transportation. They were art. They were engineering marvels. They were the difference between survival and starvation, between isolation and connection, between poverty and prosperity. Ships carried raiders to foreign shores. Ships carried traders to distant markets. Ships carried explorers to unknown lands. Ships carried the Norse across seas and rivers, allowing them to spread from Scandinavia to Iceland, Greenland, Britain, France, Russia, even North America. A ship was freedom. A ship was power. A ship was life itself. And so it made sense that a ship would also be death. That it would carry a soul across the final boundary, from the world of the living to the world of the dead. The symbolism was clear. Just as ships carried Vikings across the physical ocean, so too would they carry the dead across the metaphysical ocean that separated mortality from whatever came next. But ship burials were also profoundly practical. A ship was large enough to hold a body and extensive grave goods. A ship was a ready-made container, a structure that could be buried intact. A ship was visible, impressive, a statement of wealth and status that could be seen from a distance, marking the landscape permanently. Archaeological evidence shows that ship burials occurred throughout the Viking Age, from the 8th century through the 11th century, primarily in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, but also in areas where Vikings settled, such as the British Isles and Iceland. The most famous ship burials are the ones that have been excavated and studied extensively. These provide us with detailed knowledge of how the practice worked and what it meant. Let us travel now beyond your father's burial. Let us look at the great ship burials of history. Let us see what the wealthiest, most powerful Norse people received when they died. The Oseberg ship burial. In the year 834 CE, in the region now known as Vestfold, Norway, a woman died. We do not know her name. We do not know exactly who she was. But we know she was important. Because when she died, she was buried in a ship that would become one of the most significant archaeological finds in history. The Oseberg ship was not a warship. It was a carvey, a smaller vessel used for coastal sailing. But it was beautiful. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. The prow and stern were carved with elaborate spiraling designs, interlacing serpents and dragons. Every plank was carefully shaped and fitted. This was a ship built not just for function, but for art. The woman was placed in a burial chamber built into the ship, a small wooden room constructed amidships. She was not alone. Another woman was buried with her, either a servant or perhaps a companion of equal status. The evidence is unclear. Around them, an incredible array of grave goods was arranged. Textiles, wool and silk, some imported from far away. Wooden furniture, beds, chairs, chests, all carved and decorated. Kitchen equipment, pots, pans, ladles, cutting boards. Farm equipment, rakes, shovels, axes. Vehicles, a wagon, several sleds, all ornately carved. Animals, 15 horses, 6 dogs, 2 small cows. Even food, wheat, oats, apples, hazelnuts. This was not just a burial. This was a complete household, transported wholesale into the afterlife. Everything these women would need to continue their lives in the next world was provided. The ship and its contents were covered with a mound of earth and stones, creating a hill that dominated the landscape. For over 1,000 years, that mound sat undisturbed, a mystery, a legend, a grave. Then, in 1904, archaeologists excavated it. What they found astonished them. The clay soil had preserved everything remarkably well. The wood had not rotted. The textiles, though fragile, were intact. Even organic materials like rope and leather had survived. The Oseberg burial taught us more about Viking Age life than almost any other single find. It showed us the level of craftsmanship Vikings achieved. It showed us their artistic sensibilities. It showed us that women could receive burials as elaborate as men. It showed us the depth of their belief in an afterlife where the dead would need physical objects. The ship itself now resides in the Viking Ship Museum in Oslo, Norway. You can stand beside it and marvel at its grace, its beauty, its size. You can imagine it sailing across coastal waters, carrying these 2 women on some summer voyage. And then you can imagine it carrying them on their final voyage, into the earth, into eternity. The Gokstad Ship Burial. Not far from Oseberg, another ship burial was discovered in 1880. The Gokstad ship was different, larger, sturdier, built for open ocean travel. This was a proper Viking longship, capable of raiding voyages, capable of crossing the North Atlantic. The man buried in the Gokstad ship was tall, perhaps 6 feet tall, which was quite large for the time. He was in his 40s when he died. Analysis of his bones shows he lived a hard life. He had numerous old injuries, including damage from weapons. This was a warrior, a man who had fought and survived many battles before finally succumbing, perhaps to disease or a final injury. He was buried in a chamber within the ship, surrounded by weapons, though strangely, no sword was found. Perhaps it was grave robbed in ancient times, or perhaps he did not own a sword, or perhaps there is some other explanation lost to history. With him were buried many other items. 64 shields lined the sides of the ship. 12 horses, 6 dogs, and a peacock were sacrificed and buried. 3 small boats were included, nested within the larger ship. Beds, tents, gaming pieces, a bronze cauldron, all the comforts and entertainments of life. The Gokstad ship tells us something important. It tells us that Viking Age people believed the afterlife was not some ethereal, spiritual realm, but a place fundamentally similar to this world. A place where you would need horses to ride, dogs to hunt with, boats to travel in, beds to sleep on, games to play. The afterlife was physical, and so physical objects were necessary. This belief is very different from many other cultures' views of death. Christians believe the soul goes to heaven or hell, leaving behind all earthly possessions. Buddhists believe in reincarnation, the soul moving into a new body. Ancient Egyptians believed in a spiritual realm where the soul needed magical protection and guidance. But the Norse believed the dead went to a place where they would continue existing in a form much like their living form. They would eat, drink, sleep, work, fight, laugh. They would need their things. And so their things went with them. The Tune Ship Burial. Earlier than both Oseberg and Gokstad, around the year 900 CE or perhaps slightly before, another ship burial was created at Tune in Østfold, Norway. This one was discovered in 1867, making it the first of the great ship burials to be scientifically excavated. The Tune ship was smaller than Gokstad but still impressive, about 65 feet long. The burial chamber contained a man of status, surrounded by weapons, tools, and household goods. Horses were sacrificed. A smaller boat was included. What makes the Tune burial significant is that it was one of the first times modern people understood the full scope of Viking ship burials. Until this discovery, ship burials were known from legends and sagas, but not fully understood. The Tune excavation showed that the sagas were not exaggerating. Ship burials really happened. They were really this elaborate. The Sutton Hoo ship burial. We must also speak of Sutton Hoo, though it is not Norse but Anglo-Saxon, a related culture that shared many traditions with the Vikings. In 1939, in Suffolk, England, archaeologists excavated a massive burial mound. Inside, they found the impression of a ship. The wood had rotted away, leaving only a ghost in the soil, but the iron rivets remained, marking where the planks had been. This ship was huge, perhaps 90 feet long. In the center, a burial chamber had been built. And in that chamber was one of the richest collections of grave goods ever discovered in Britain. A helmet, intricately decorated with scenes of warriors and animals. A sword with a gold hilt. Spears, shields, bowls, drinking horns, Byzantine silverware, gold coins, jewelry, a lyre, and dozens of other objects. The wealth was staggering. No body was found. Perhaps it had completely decomposed in the acidic soil. Perhaps this was a cenotaph, a memorial burial with no actual body. We do not know. But what we know is this: whoever was buried at Sutton Hoo was a king or a man of equivalent power. And he was buried in a manner that echoed Viking traditions, with a ship and vast wealth, prepared for an afterlife that would require all the trappings of earthly existence. Sutton Hoo shows us that ship burials were not unique to Scandinavia. They were part of a broader Northern European tradition, a shared understanding of death and the afterlife that crossed tribal and national boundaries. The mechanics of ship burial. How was a ship burial actually accomplished? The process was complex and labor-intensive. First, a ship had to be selected. For wealthy burials, this might be a ship specifically built for the purpose, or a ship retired from service. For less wealthy burials, like your father's, an old boat past its useful life might be purchased cheaply. The ship was dragged inland, away from the water, to the chosen burial site. This required many people. Ships are heavy, and moving one overland, even with rollers and ropes, was hard work. A trench was dug to receive the ship. The depth varied. Some ships were buried deeply, others more shallowly. The trench was usually shaped to the curve of the hull, so the ship would sit level. The ship was maneuvered into the trench. More hard work. More coordination. Inside the ship, a burial chamber might be constructed, a small wooden room, often built amidships where the vessel was widest. Alternatively, the body and goods might simply be arranged directly in the hull. The body was placed inside, often lying down but sometimes seated, depending on tradition and the wishes of the family. Grave goods were arranged around the body. This was done carefully, with thought given to what the dead person would need and want. Personal items close to the body. Larger items like animals or wagons placed strategically. Valuable items that demonstrated wealth and status positioned prominently. In some cases, the ship was then covered with a wooden roof before being buried, creating a fully enclosed chamber. In other cases, the ship was open to the sky before the earth was piled on. Then came the burial itself. Earth was shoveled over the ship, slowly covering it completely. Stones might be added to weigh down the mound and mark it. The result was a large earthen mound, often visible from a great distance, marking the landscape permanently. These mounds became part of the cultural geography. They were landmarks. They were reminders of the past. They were places of memory. People would gather at burial mounds for assemblies and festivals. They would swear oaths on the mounds of ancestors. They would tell stories about who was buried there and what they had accomplished in life. A ship burial was not just a private family matter. It was a public statement. It said, this person mattered. This person had status. This person deserves to be remembered. The alternatives to ship burial. Of course, not everyone could afford a ship burial. Most Norse people were buried much more simply. Many were buried in simple graves, rectangular pits dug into the earth, lined perhaps with stones, the body wrapped in cloth or placed in a wooden coffin. Grave goods might be minimal: a knife, a comb, a pot. Or there might be none at all, just the body and the earth. Some were cremated. Cremation was common in certain regions and time periods. The body would be placed on a pyre, along with some possessions, and burned. The ashes and bone fragments would be collected and buried in an urn or simply scattered. Cremation had its own symbolism: purification by fire, transformation, release of the spirit. Cremation graves sometimes included surprising things. Archaeologists have found cremation burials where melted glass beads, twisted metal fragments, and charred bones are all mixed together, evidence of the intense heat of the pyre and the totality of the destruction. Some Norse people were buried in boats, but not full-sized ships. Smaller boats, or even just symbolic boats made of stones arranged in a boat shape. These stone ships are found across Scandinavia, oval arrangements of standing stones, clearly meant to evoke the shape of a vessel. A person buried inside such a stone ship was still being sent on a journey, still being honored with the symbolism of the sea, but at a fraction of the cost. Some were buried in chambers dug into hillsides, wooden rooms built underground, accessed by tunnels. These chambers might contain multiple people, family tombs where generations could be interred together. And some, particularly the poor, the enslaved, the outcast, received no proper burial at all. They might be thrown into bogs or unmarked pits, their deaths unmourned, their names forgotten. Not everyone in Viking society was valued equally. Not everyone was remembered. The grave goods. What people were buried with tells us an enormous amount about their lives, their culture, their beliefs. Men were often buried with weapons. Swords were the most prestigious, expensive, difficult to make, symbols of warrior status. But many men received axes instead, or spears, or simply knives. Even a knife was better than nothing. It showed the dead man could defend himself in the afterlife. Women were often buried with jewelry. Brooches, especially the distinctive oval brooches used to fasten dresses. Beads, glass, amber, sometimes precious stones. Rings. These items showed status, wealth, beauty. They also showed connection. Many items of jewelry were gifts from family members or lovers, tangible reminders of relationships. Women were also buried with domestic tools. Spindle whorls for spinning thread. Weaving tablets. Needles and thread. Keys, which symbolized their role as household managers, controlling access to storage and resources. These items show that women's work was valued, that their skills were considered important enough to accompany them to the afterlife. Both men and women might be buried with tools of their trade. Blacksmiths with hammers and tongs. Farmers with sickles and plows. Fishermen with hooks and weights. Merchants with scales and weights. Your father with his carving tools. Food and drink were common. Not lavish feasts, usually, but enough to sustain the journey. Dried meat, bread, cheese, beer, mead. Archaeologists often find the remains of these provisions: animal bones gnawed by grave robbers or scavengers, pottery shards from broken beer jars. Animals were frequently sacrificed and buried. Horses were the most prestigious, but also the most expensive. Dogs were common. Cattle, sheep, pigs, all found their way into graves. These animals served multiple purposes. They were food. They were transportation. They were companions. A horse could carry you in the afterlife. A dog could hunt for you and guard you. A cow could provide milk. Sometimes the animal sacrifices seem excessive. The Oseberg burial had 15 horses. That is far more than one person needs. Perhaps it was a demonstration of wealth. Look how many horses we can afford to kill. Perhaps it had ritual significance. Perhaps each horse represented something specific, carried some particular meaning now lost to us. Gaming pieces are found in many graves. Chess-like games, dice, board games. This tells us the Norse believed the afterlife included leisure time. You would not be working constantly in hell. You would have time to play, to relax, to enjoy yourself. Personal items are common. Combs, particularly. The Norse were obsessed with grooming, with keeping their hair and beards neat. A comb was essential. Also mirrors, tweezers, ear spoons, all the small tools of daily hygiene. Containers of all kinds. Chests for storing valuables. Boxes for keeping small items. Barrels for liquids. Bags and pouches. These containers were not just practical. They symbolized ownership, control, the ability to keep and organize possessions. Textiles, though these rarely survive. Cloth was valuable in the Viking Age, labor-intensive to produce. Being buried in fine clothing, wrapped in good blankets, was a sign of wealth. Sometimes items seem strange to us. Why was a peacock buried at Gokstad? Peacocks are not native to Scandinavia. This bird must have been imported, perhaps from Byzantium or the Middle East. It would have been exotic, rare, a symbol of far-reaching connections and wealth. Why were bronze bowls from the Mediterranean found in Swedish graves? Because they proved the dead person had traveled, or had family who traveled, or had wealth to purchase exotic goods. They were status symbols. Why were gaming pieces carved from walrus ivory found in graves? Because walrus ivory came from the far north, from Arctic waters where walrus hunting was dangerous. Possessing such items showed connection to trade networks, showed access to rare materials. Every object told a story. Every object meant something. And together, these objects painted a picture of a life, a personality, an identity. The meaning of sacrifice. The animal sacrifices deserve special attention. The Norse did not sentimentalize animals the way modern people often do. Animals were resources. They were food, labor, materials. Killing an animal was not inherently cruel. It was practical. But burying animals with the dead was a sacrifice. You were giving up resources, giving up future use of these animals, for the sake of honoring the dead and ensuring they were provided for in the afterlife. The burial of enslaved people or servants with their masters is more troubling. There is evidence this sometimes happened. When a high-status person died, their household might be expected to accompany them. This was not voluntary. This was human sacrifice. An Arab traveler named Ibn Fadlan witnessed a Rus, likely Swedish Vikings who had settled in what is now Russia, funeral in 922 CE and wrote a detailed account. He described how an enslaved woman volunteered, or was coerced, the account is unclear, to die with her master. She was given alcohol, drugged, sexually assaulted by the dead man's companions as part of some ritual, and then killed and burned on the funeral pyre along with her master's body. Ibn Fadlan's account is disturbing. It shows a darker side of Viking culture, one where human life could be considered expendable in service of death rituals. However, we must be careful. Ibn Fadlan was an outsider, viewing Norse culture through his own cultural lens. His account might be exaggerated. It might be misunderstood. It might not represent common practice. Archaeological evidence for human sacrifice in Viking burials is ambiguous. Some graves contain multiple bodies, but it's often unclear if the second person was sacrificed or simply buried in the same tomb because they died around the same time. DNA evidence sometimes shows that people buried together were related, suggesting family tombs rather than master and servant burials. Still, we cannot entirely dismiss the possibility. Viking culture was violent. It was hierarchical. It valued honor and status above many other concerns. It is plausible that human sacrifice occurred in some contexts, particularly in high-status funerals where the demonstration of power and wealth was paramount. This is one of the uncomfortable truths about studying the past. Not everything was noble or beautiful. Some practices were brutal. Some beliefs were cruel. We can study these practices, try to understand them in their context, without condoning them. The Norse lived in a hard world. Survival was difficult. Life was short. Violence was common. In such a world, beliefs and practices develop that seem harsh to us now, living in relative comfort and safety. We judge them from a position of privilege. But we can also recognize that even in their hardness, there was humanity. Even in their violence, there was love. The care taken in preparing bodies for burial. The wealth spent on grave goods. The feasts held in honor of the dead. These show that the Norse cared deeply about the deceased. They wanted to honor them. They wanted to send them off properly. Death rituals are always about the living as much as the dead. They help the living process grief, express love, maintain social bonds, reaffirm values. The elaborate Viking ship burials were not just for the dead person's benefit. They were for the family, the community, the culture itself. The decline of ship burials. As Christianity spread through Scandinavia in the 10th and 11th centuries, burial practices changed. Christians did not believe in a physical afterlife where you would need ships and swords and horses. Christians believed in heaven and hell, spiritual realms where earthly possessions were irrelevant. Christian burial was simple by comparison. The body was buried in a churchyard, facing east, with minimal grave goods, perhaps a small cross, nothing more. No ships, no weapons, no animals, just the body, returning to dust, awaiting resurrection on Judgment Day. The old burial practices did not disappear overnight. For generations, people practiced a hybrid form, officially Christian, but still including some old customs. A Christian burial, but with a knife tucked into the grave just in case. A prayer to the Christian God, but also a whispered word to Odin. Gradually, though, the old ways faded. The last ship burials date to around 1000 CE. After that, you find only Christian burials, simple and uniform. But the memory remained. The great burial mounds dotted the landscape, visible reminders of ancestors who had been honored in the old way. Stories were told about those buried in the mounds. Some became legends. Some became ghosts. And now, 1,000 years later, archaeologists excavate these burials and bring the stories back to light. The ships are displayed in museums. The grave goods are studied and catalogued. The bones are analyzed, revealing age, sex, diet, disease, injuries. The dead speak to us across the centuries. They tell us who they were, how they lived, what they believed, what they feared, what they hoped for. Returning to your father. We have traveled far from your father's modest ship burial. We have seen the grand burials of the wealthy and powerful. We have explored the meanings and mechanisms of these rituals. But in the end, every burial, grand or simple, serves the same purpose: to honor the dead, to ease the living's grief, to maintain the bonds between past and present, between this world and the next. Your father's burial may not have 15 horses and Byzantine silver, but it has love, it has care, it has respect, and in the end, that is what matters most. You stand now at his grave mound, the sun setting, the work complete. Around you, people are leaving, heading home, the duty done. Soon, you will leave too. You will return to your life. You will continue. But you will never forget this day. This moment. This farewell. Your father is gone. but he remains. In the earth, in memory, in the work he created, in the children he raised, in the stories that will be told for generations. He sails now on his final journey. And you, standing on the shore, watch him go with love and pride and sorrow and hope. Go well, Father. Go well. Ship burials were the most dramatic form of Viking funerary practice, but they were far from the only way the Norse honored their dead. Across Scandinavia and the Viking diaspora, people developed numerous burial customs, each with its own symbolism and significance. Let us explore these other practices. Let us see the variety of ways people said goodbye. Cremation. Burning the dead was ancient, predating the Viking Age by millennia. Throughout Scandinavia, cremation was common, perhaps even more common than burial for much of the period. The process was relatively straightforward. A pyre was built, a large pile of wood, carefully stacked to allow airflow and maximum heat. The body was placed on top, often dressed in good clothing, sometimes surrounded by possessions. The pyre was lit. A cremation fire could burn for hours. The heat was intense, hot enough to reduce bones to fragments, to melt metal, to turn everything to ash and char. Family members might tend the fire, adding more wood, using poles to shift the burning mass, ensuring everything burned completely. When the fire finally died and the embers cooled, the family would sift through the remains. Bone fragments were collected. Melted metal, jewelry, weapons, tools, was gathered. Everything was placed in an urn or container. This container was then buried. Sometimes in a simple grave. Sometimes in a more elaborate chamber. Sometimes the ashes were simply scattered in a meaningful location, a favorite field, a mountain peak, the sea. Cremation had powerful symbolism. Fire was purifying. It transformed. It destroyed the physical body completely, releasing the spirit. Some scholars believe cremation was associated with particular gods or religious beliefs, though the evidence is not entirely clear. What is clear is that cremation was expensive in terms of resources. You needed a lot of wood to generate enough heat to consume a human body completely. You needed time and labor to build the pyre and tend the fire. In regions where wood was scarce, cremation was less common. In heavily forested areas, it was more practical. Archaeological evidence of cremation is everywhere in Scandinavia. Thousands of cremation burials have been excavated. They vary enormously in elaboration. Some contain only a handful of bone fragments in a small urn. Others contain large amounts of ash, melted metals, charred wood, and other materials, all buried in substantial graves. One interesting variant is the cremation burial that mimics an inhumation burial. The cremated remains are placed in a grave that is then furnished with objects as though it were a body burial, weapons placed where arms would be, jewelry where the neck or chest would be, creating a symbolic body from ashes and objects. Another variant is double cremation. Two people burned together, their ashes mixed and buried together. Usually this indicates a married couple or very close relationship. They were together in life. They remain together in death and the afterlife. Chamber graves. In some regions, particularly in Sweden, wealthy individuals were buried in chambers, wooden rooms constructed specifically for burial, usually dug into the side of a hill or mound. These chambers were essentially underground houses. They had wooden walls, wooden floors, wooden roofs. They contained furniture, beds, chairs, tables. They contained storage, chests and barrels and boxes. They contained all the amenities of a real dwelling. The body was placed in the chamber, sometimes in a bed, as though sleeping. Grave goods surrounded them. Food and drink were left on tables. Clothing hung on pegs. Everything was arranged to create a complete living environment. Then the chamber was sealed. Earth was piled on top, creating a large mound. And there the dead person remained, in their underground home, waiting out eternity. Chamber graves are fascinating because they so clearly show the Norse conception of the afterlife as a continuation of earthly existence. The dead person was not imagined as a ghost or spirit floating in some ethereal realm. They were imagined as a physical being in a physical place, needing physical objects. This is dramatically different from many other cultures. Ancient Egyptians, for instance, believed the dead needed spiritual protection and guidance, hence the elaborate tomb texts and amulets. Ancient Greeks imagined the dead as shades in the underworld, powerless and pitiful. Christians believe in resurrection of a glorified body, fundamentally different from the mortal body. But the Norse imagined the dead essentially as themselves, just in a different location. You would still be you. You would still need your stuff. You would still eat and drink and sleep. Death changed where you were, not what you were. This belief had profound implications. It meant caring for the dead was a practical matter. You had to provide them with actual, usable items. You had to ensure their comfort. You had to give them what they would need. Standing stones and rune stones. Not all burials involved elaborate grave goods or structures. Some were marked simply with stones, standing stones placed upright at the gravesite, sometimes carved with runes. Runes were the Norse writing system, an angular alphabet well suited to carving in wood or stone. Rune stones served multiple purposes. They marked graves, ensuring they would not be forgotten. They proclaimed the name and deeds of the dead, creating a permanent record. They demonstrated the family's love and respect. A typical runic inscription might read something like, "Thorstein raised this stone in memory of Gunnar his son, who died in the west." Short, simple, direct, but powerful. This stone ensures Gunnar is remembered. It tells everyone who passes that Gunnar existed, that he mattered, that he died far from home but was honored properly. Some rune stones are more elaborate, including poetry, descriptions of deeds, images carved in the stone. The most famous rune stones are decorated with intricate carvings, serpents and dragons intertwining, warriors in battle, ships sailing, horses galloping. These stones were not just grave markers. They were art. They were literature. They were history written in stone. Hundreds of rune stones survive across Scandinavia, though many more must have existed and been lost to time, destroyed, broken, buried, or simply weathered away. Some rune stones are Christian, erected after Scandinavia converted. These include crosses and Christian prayers alongside the Old Norse imagery. They show the transitional period where old and new beliefs coexisted. Stone ships. We mentioned stone ships earlier, boat-shaped arrangements of standing stones, with a burial placed in the center. These are common across Scandinavia, particularly in Sweden and the Baltic Islands. A stone ship might be small, just a few meters long, or enormous, stretching dozens of meters. The largest stone ships required moving massive boulders, arranging them in precise formations. This was a huge undertaking, requiring many workers and significant time. Why ships made of stone? The symbolism is clear: the ship as vessel for the journey to the afterlife. But why not use actual ships? Perhaps cost. Stone was free, ships were expensive. A stone ship gave the symbolic benefit of ship burial without the expense of sacrificing an actual boat. Perhaps permanence. Wood rots. Ships decay. But stone endures. A stone ship would mark the grave forever, visible for generations. Perhaps tradition. In some regions, stone ships were the traditional form, passed down through centuries, and people continued the practice because that was how it was done. Whatever the reason, stone ships are striking. They dominate the landscape. They catch the eye. They make you wonder who was buried there, what they did in life, why they deserved such honor. Some stone ship sites contain dozens of ships, creating vast burial grounds. These must have been used by communities over long periods, with new graves added across generations. Walking through such a site is eerie. All these stone boats, all these people, all these lives now ended, all these stories now lost. Reuse of graves. Not all burials were permanent individual affairs. Some graves were reused, with multiple people buried in the same location across time. This was particularly true of family tombs. A chamber or mound might be opened periodically to add new family members. The earlier burials would be pushed to the side, making room for the new arrival. Grave goods might be rearranged or removed. The tomb became a collective family space. This practice shows a different attitude toward death. The individual burial was less important than the family continuity. Being buried with your ancestors was the point. The family remained together, in death as in life. Some reused graves seem more haphazard. Perhaps a new burial was simply dug in a convenient location that happened to intersect with an older grave. The older remains were disturbed, pushed aside, sometimes damaged or removed. This could be practical expediency. Good burial sites were limited, but it could also reflect changing attitudes, with newer generations caring less about the old graves. Grave robbery. We must acknowledge that many Viking graves were robbed in antiquity. Valuable items, weapons, jewelry, silver, were tempting targets. Sometimes graves were robbed shortly after burial, perhaps even by people who attended the funeral and knew what was buried. Sometimes graves were robbed centuries later by people who stumbled upon the mounds and decided to see what was inside. Grave robbery was considered a serious crime and a moral violation. The sagas contain stories of grave robbers being cursed or killed by Draugr who defended their mounds. But despite the risks, both supernatural and legal, people did it. From a modern archaeological perspective, grave robbery is frustrating. Robbed graves have lost much of their information. We don't know what was originally there. We can't fully reconstruct the burial or understand its meaning. But unrobbed graves are rare treasures. The great ship burials, Oseberg, Gokstad, Sutton Hoo, survived largely intact because they were either deeply buried or located in places robbers didn't find. When archaeologists excavate such sites, they find complete assemblages, everything as it was placed 1,000 years ago. These sites are archaeological gold. Battlefield burials. Warriors who died in battle were sometimes buried where they fell. After a battle, the victors might gather the dead and create mass graves, or individual mounds for important warriors. These battlefield burials were often hasty affairs, less elaborate than home burials, but still honoring the dead. Some battlefields have been excavated and show the evidence. At Visby in Sweden, for instance, archaeologists found mass graves from a battle in 1361 CE. Hundreds of people, many still wearing armor, hastily buried in pits. Analysis of the bones shows horrific wounds, skulls split by axes, limbs severed by swords. These were violent deaths, and the burials reflect the chaos and horror of medieval combat. But not all battlefield burials were mass graves. Important warriors might receive individual honors. A jarl or leader who died in battle might be given a proper burial on the battlefield, with a mound raised over him, marking the site of his death and his bravery. These battlefield mounds became landmarks. They were remembered. Stories were told about them. Here fell Thorstein the Bold in battle against the men of Jarl Sigurd. The landscape itself became a memorial. Water burials. Some people were buried at sea, their bodies committed to the waves. This was rare and usually reserved for specific circumstances, perhaps someone who died at sea and could not be brought home, perhaps someone whose dying wish was to be returned to the ocean. A body might be weighted and sunk, or placed in a small boat that was set adrift or deliberately sunk. The sea burial had its own poetry, the ocean as both grave and highway, the body returning to the element that defined so much of Viking life. Archaeological evidence for sea burials is obviously difficult to find. A body weighted and sunk leaves no trace. But literary sources mention the practice, and it surely occurred. The famous scene in Ibn Fadlan's account describes a ship burial that takes place on a river. The ship is finally set on fire and pushed out into the water, burning as it floats away. This combines ship burial, cremation, and water burial into a single dramatic ritual. Bog bodies. A different kind of burial, or perhaps execution, involved placing bodies in bogs. Bog bodies have been found across northern Europe, preserved by the acidic anaerobic conditions of peat bogs. Many date to the Iron Age, before the Viking period, but some are later. These bog bodies often show signs of violence: throats cut, heads bashed, strangled with ropes. They were likely criminals, outcasts, or sacrificial victims. Being placed in a bog denied them proper burial, denied them honor, denied them any hope of a good afterlife. The bog bodies are haunting. Preserved for millennia, they look eerily lifelike, skin intact, hair and beards still present, even stomach contents preserved. Studying them tells us about diet, health, violence, and the dark side of Norse culture. Not everyone was honored in death. Some were deliberately dishonored, their bodies disposed of in ways that reflected their low status or their crimes. The bog was a liminal space, not land, not water, not anywhere proper. It was where unwanted things went. The variety of Viking burial practices reflects the diversity of Viking culture itself. There was no single way to honor the dead. Different regions, different time periods, different families, different circumstances, all these factors influenced how people were buried. But across all this variety, certain themes remain constant. The dead needed to be honored. They needed provisions for their journey. They needed to be remembered. Their burial reflected their life, their status, their relationships. And the living needed rituals to help them cope with loss. The preparation of the body, the selection of grave goods, the feast, the burial itself, all these gave structure to grief, gave purpose to sorrow, gave meaning to death. Your father's burial fits into this broader tradition. His ship burial, modest by the standards of the great ship burials but still significant, places him within a cultural practice stretching back centuries. He joins countless others who were honored in this way, who were sent on their journey with love and care and hope. And now, as night falls fully, as the last mourners depart, as you stand alone at his mound, you are connected to all those who have ever stood at a grave, saying goodbye, promising to remember. The past reaches forward. The dead live on in memory. And you carry them with you, always. 3 months have passed since your father's burial. Winter has arrived. The world is frozen and still. Snow covers the mound that holds your father's ship. The sea is crusted with ice. The days are short, the nights long and cold. You stand at your workshop bench, the same bench where your father taught you to carve. In your hands is a piece of oak, partially shaped. You are making a drinking horn holder, decorating it with interlacing patterns, dragons that weave around the rim. Your father's tools surround you. You kept some of them. The best chisels. His favorite knife. You could not bury them all. You needed tools to continue his work, to carry on his craft. Your hands move almost automatically now, following patterns he taught you years ago. Loop here, spiral there, the dragon's head emerging from the wood like it was always there, just waiting to be revealed. Outside, you hear children playing in the snow. Your sister's children. They are building something, laughing, arguing about how to do it. Their voices carry through the cold air. Your mother sits by the fire inside the house, spinning wool. She does not speak of your father often, but you know she thinks of him constantly. Sometimes you catch her looking at his empty chair, or touching the cloak he used to wear, or pausing in the middle of some task as memory overtakes her. Grief is like this. It does not end. It changes. The sharp pain of early loss dulls into a constant ache, a background awareness that someone is missing, a space that can never be filled. But alongside the grief is something else. gratitude, pride, love that persists beyond death. Your father lived a good life. He died peacefully. He was honored properly. His name will be remembered. And his work remains. Every carved post in every house he worked on. Every tool he made for other craftsmen. Every toy he whittled for children. Every ship prow he carved with dragon heads and serpent tails. All of it still exists, scattered across the region, testament to his skill and his life. You are part of that legacy now. You carry it forward. When people see your work, they will remember him, because he taught you. When you teach your own children someday, you will pass on his techniques, his knowledge, his approach to the wood and the tools. This is how people live forever. Not in Valhalla or hell, but in the world of the living. In the memories of those who loved them. In the things they created. In the lessons they taught. In the children they raised. The Norse understood this. They valued fame and reputation above almost everything. A good name, spoken with respect, continuing through generations, this was true immortality. The sagas are full of people desperately trying to ensure their names would be remembered. Warriors seeking glory in battle specifically so skalds would compose poems about them. Wealthy people raising huge runestones so their deeds would be recorded permanently. Entire families tracing their ancestry back to famous heroes or gods, claiming their place in the great story of the North. Your father was not famous. He was not a warrior or a jarl or a king. But within his community, he was known. He was respected. He mattered. And that is its own form of immortality. The ancestor cult. The Norse practiced a form of ancestor worship. The dead were not forgotten, they were actively honored and consulted. Important ancestors had power. They could help the living, offering protection, guidance, good fortune. Or they could harm the living if they were disrespected or forgotten. Family burial mounds became sacred sites. People would visit these mounds, leave offerings, speak to the ancestors, ask for their blessings. Before important decisions, battles, voyages, marriages, people might consult the ancestors, either through visits to burial mounds or through dreams and visions. Some families claimed descent from gods or legendary heroes. These lineages were carefully maintained, recited at important occasions. I am Bjorn, son of Thorstein, son of Eric, son of Harald, son of Ragnar, descended from the line of kings. The genealogy connected the living to the past, to sources of power and legitimacy. This is why burial was so important. An unburied person, or a person buried improperly, could not become a proper ancestor. They might become something else, a draugr, a ghost, a malevolent spirit. But they would not be an honored ancestor offering protection to their descendants. Your father, buried properly, with honor and care, becomes part of your family's line of ancestors. Someday, your grandchildren will visit his mound. They will speak his name. They will tell stories about him. And he will watch over them, in whatever way the dead watch over the living. The Christianization. By the time you are old, Christianity has fully arrived in your region. The old gods are fading. Temples are being torn down or converted to churches. The new religion demands exclusive devotion. No more offerings to Odin or Thor, no more rituals at ancestor mounds. This transition is not easy. Many people resist. The old ways are deeply embedded in culture, in identity, in understanding of the world. But the kings have converted, and the kings have power, and slowly, inexorably, the old religion dies. Churches are built. Priests arrive. Baptisms are performed. The dead are now buried in Christian graveyards, simple graves with no weapons or ships or grave goods. Just bodies, awaiting resurrection. You wonder what your father would think. He was raised in the old ways. He honored the old gods, made offerings at the old festivals, told stories of Thor and Odin and Freya. Would he accept this new god? Would he resist? But he is gone, and you must navigate this changing world. You attend church because it is expected. You listen to the priests speak of heaven and hell, of sin and salvation, of a single God who created everything. Some of it makes sense to you. Some of it feels alien. You do not entirely abandon the old beliefs, but you do not openly practice them either. You exist in between, in the twilight between two worlds. Many people in your generation are like this. Officially Christian, but privately still honoring some old customs. Still telling the old stories to children. Still making small offerings at ancestor mounds when no one is watching. Still believing, just a little, in the old gods. This hybrid period lasts for generations. Eventually, the old religion is forgotten almost entirely, surviving only in fragmented folklore and half-remembered tales. But for now, in your lifetime, the transition is happening, and it is painful and confusing and necessary. The long view. 1,000 years from now, archaeologists will excavate your father's burial. They will carefully brush away the dirt, exposing the timbers of the ship, now rotted to dark stains in the soil. They will find the iron nails that held the planks together. They will find the tools you buried with him, corroded but recognizable. They will find bones, and analyze them, and learn about his age, his diet, his health. They will photograph everything, measure everything, catalog everything. They will write papers about this burial, adding it to the database of known Viking ship burials. They will compare it to others, looking for patterns, trying to understand your culture, your beliefs, your world. They will display some of the artifacts in museums. People from the future, people you cannot imagine, will stand before glass cases and look at your father's knife, his comb, the fragments of his ship. They will read placards explaining Viking death rituals. They will be fascinated or bored, educated or confused, but they will look, and in that looking, your father will be remembered once again. This is the ultimate legacy. Not just memory in the next generation, or the one after, but memory stretching across centuries. Your father's burial ensures he will be known forever, or at least as long as human civilization preserves its past. Is this what you intended when you buried him? Did you think about future archaeologists? Of course not. You were thinking about your grief, your duty, your love. You were thinking about giving him a proper send-off, about honoring him as he deserved. But the effect is the same. By burying him with care, by creating a mound, by including grave goods, you have created a time capsule. You have sent a message to the future. This person mattered. Remember him. You're ending. You are old now. Your hands shake. Your eyes are weak. You can no longer carve fine details. Your workshop has been taken over by your son, who carves well, though differently than you, differently than your father. Your mother is long dead, buried beside your father in the same mound. Your sister's children have grown and had children of their own. The world has changed so much. Ships are larger now. People sail farther. New lands have been discovered. New trade routes opened. Christianity has won. The old temples are ruins. The old stories are half forgotten. But the mound remains. Your father's mound. You visit it sometimes, when your legs allow, when the weather is mild. You sit beside it and speak to him, telling him about your life, about his grandchildren, about the world he no longer knows. You do not know if he is. Christian priests say the dead are in heaven or hell, not lingering in burial mounds. But old habits persist. You speak to him anyway. And when you die, you are buried there too. Not in a ship, those days are past. But beside him, in the Christian fashion, wrapped in a shroud, prayed over by a priest. Your family weeps. They bury you. They remember. The mound grows larger, holding now 3 generations. A family together in death as they were in life. And 1,000 years later, when archaeologists excavate this site, they will find all of you. They will see the sequence of burials, the different practices, the transition from pagan to Christian. They will reconstruct your family, your lives, your deaths. They will write about you. They will teach about you. They will remember. Because in the end, that is what we all want, isn't it? To be remembered. To matter. To leave some mark on the world that persists after we are gone. The Vikings understood this. They built mounds and raised stones and composed poems and told stories, all to ensure memory would persist. And it did. Here we are, 1,000 years later, still speaking their names, still marveling at their ships, still learning from their graves. They achieved immortality, not in Valhalla, not in hell, but in memory, in story, in the long, unbroken chain of human remembrance that stretches from the past into the future, connecting us all. Close your eyes now. The journey is ending. You have walked with Bjorn through his father's death, through the rituals of burial, through the years that followed. You have seen how the Vikings honored the dead and understood their mortality. As you drift toward sleep, remember this. You, too, will be remembered. The people you love will remember you. The things you create, the lessons you teach, the kindness you show, these will persist. You are part of the chain. You are part of the story. Sleep now. The northern wind is quiet tonight. The mounds are still. The dead rest peacefully, knowing they have not been forgotten. Go well. Go well.